everybody, welcome to Living Traditions Homestead. Well, I have gotten a special request for a video, and that is to do a video about planting in containers or doing container gardening. That was actually a request from my sister, who right now is living in an apartment but wants to start growing some of her own food. And I'm so proud of her, and I'm proud of each one of you who has thought that they would like to grow some food too, but only have a small amount of space and wonder how can you do it. So today I'm going to share with you the knowledge that I have about growing in pots, growing in containers. This year we're actually growing more in pots than we've ever grown before, so this actually is perfect timing for me to do a video for you guys. So I have 3 different sized pots that I'm going to be using to share some information with you today. Lots of things to talk about, so we're just going to get started. The first 2 things that you need to think about when it comes to container gardening is drainage and water retention. And that sounds kind of contradictory, but let me talk with you about them. I want to talk with you first about drainage. Drainage is very important when container gardening. You're going to be doing a lot of hand watering, and all that water is going to come down to the bottom of your container. But if it stays there and has no way to get out of the bottom of your container, it's going to rot all of your roots and your plants are going to die. So drainage is very important. To talk about this, I'm going to first introduce the 3 pots that I'm going to be using throughout this entire video, giving examples in each one of these. I'm going to be using just kind of a standard flower pot that you can get from the store. This one didn't really come with any holes in it at all. This is a hanging pot that I actually got petunias in last year. Has a couple holes in the bottom, and then I use these big giant mineral tubs that I get from farmers that are friends. Cattle minerals come in here, and they're perfect. They're giant perfect pots to be doing some gardening in. These don't have any holes in them either. Holes in the pots that you're going to plant in are so important. If the pots you choose to garden in or to plant in don't have any holes, then you're going to need to put holes in them. Also, a lot of pots that you get from the store, if they have holes in them, they're not big enough. So plan to drill bigger holes. This pot right here, I got from the store. Gosh, I've had this for ever and ever. It has a few tiny holes, but over the last couple years, I've realized that the drainage hasn't been good enough out of them. So today I'm going to drill some more. I'm going to be using a drill with a 1-inch bit on it. Now this is just what I'm going to use for this size pot and for my bigger Crystalex pot, but even 1/2-inch holes, if you have enough of them, would probably be enough. Both of these are plastic, so it's going to be fine for me to use this bit. Now in this size pot, which is probably an 8-inch pot at the bottom, I'm going to put at least 4 holes at the bottom. Maybe 3. Now that is adequate amount of space for the extra water to get out of. But also, this is enough space for soil to come out of, so I'm going to talk with you about how to prevent all of that soil from coming out. Before I move on to that though, I want to make sure that I have enough holes in my big Crystalex pot. I'm going to put a bunch of holes in here. 1 in the center and then a bunch around the side. Because this pot is going to have so much soil in it, and it's going to be really heavy, the soil is, I'm going to add 2 holes right on the side so that as water comes down, it will also seep out the side. The other advantage to that is if you have this pot sitting flat on the ground. If the ground underneath it is really hard, all of the water may not drain out of these holes that are right on the bottom very well. So by adding a couple holes on the sides, it just gives another opportunity for that water to come out of there. So I'm going to put 2 holes near the bottom on the side here. Now, to prevent some of the soil from leaking out of these holes, on these 2 buckets here, I'm going to put a piece of woven weed fabric down in there. Now, this is not solid plastic. This is actually woven plastic fabric that allows water to penetrate through it. So I'm going to put that down inside 2 of my containers. And here's a big one. This will cover all of those holes, including the ones on the side, because I've left a little extra room here. Now, if you don't have woven weed fabric for the bottom of your plants, it's okay. There are other things that you can use. If you have some window screen, that would work really well, but also just a mesh onion bag, that would be perfect. The other trick that I use to increase drainage in containers is to put something else on the bottom that allows the water to flow through quickly. So in our case right now, I'm going to be using mulch on the bottom, just like wood chips. You can also use gravel, something like that, that is not compact, that allows the water to flow through, like 2 inches maybe between your soil and the bottom of the container, because that will allow the water to really flow through the bottom of the pot easily. So I'm going to put about 2 inches, maybe 3 inches on the bottom of this pot here to increase that drainage. And I'm also going to put it on the bottom of my hanging pot here. Now, my hanging pot has adequate sized holes on the bottom, but they're not so big that I'm concerned about soil getting through. Plus, with the mulch down here, the mulch is bigger pieces, so not a lot of it is going to leak through. So I'm going to put a nice amount of mulch on the bottom of this pot here for an extra nice drainage barrier. And I have some left, so I might as well put it in the bottom of my big bucket here. Now, I don't always do this step with the mulch, but it is a really good idea to do that. That way you'll sleep really well knowing that the roots of your plants are not getting all soggy and sitting down there in a bunch of stagnant water. Okay, so that is the first big thing that you need to consider with container gardening is drainage. I also talked about water retention, which seems kind of contradictory to the drainage issue. But with container gardening, you don't want all that water to sit on the bottom of the pot, but you also don't want it to dry out really fast. So you want whatever planting material or soil you use, you want it to be something that's really going to hold on to that moisture, and we'll talk a little bit about that. There are 3 things that I recommend that you use to plant in these containers or pots. The first thing I recommend is potting mix. Potting soil or potting mix has things in it specifically for using in containers, in pots. It includes perlite or vermiculite, sometimes a combination of both, and that really helps with drainage. A lot of times there's peat moss mixed in, which will help with moisture retention, and then some kind of soil. That mix is perfect for pots. Another thing you can use is potting soil that is half mixed with compost. The advantage there is compost is just filled with organic material that is really nutrient dense for your plants. The third thing I would recommend is all compost. I generally will plant in all compost if I can. That's what I'm going to be planting in today. The compost I have right now is really composted mulch. Composted mulch has bigger pieces in it, which is really helpful for drainage. That's why I really enjoy planting in composted mulch. So let's go over, fill these pots up with the composted mulch and come back so we can get started planting. Now, this composted mulch we buy in bulk by the trailer load. You may be buying in, you know, bag compost, bag potting soil, and that's fine. This is just what we have. We're gonna fill these pots until they're about 1 inch or 1.5 inches from the top. Okay, let's get these pots back over there so we can get planting. All of our pots are filled and ready to be planted. But first, I want to talk with you about what you can use at this point to fertilize your plants. I'm talking about it first because there are some that we want to mix in with the top layer of soil before we plant our new plants, so that as soon as those plants get down into the dirt, they have amazing amounts of nutrients that will just help them grow and turn out to be beautiful and productive food plants. There are 3 things that I'm going to talk with you about today, and I like each one of them. The first thing is what we use the most on the homestead, and that is rabbit manure. We raise a lot of rabbits for meat here on the homestead, and rabbit manure is wonderful fertilizer. Now, you've probably heard that things like cow manure and chicken manure need to be composted before you can use them for growing, but rabbit manure, you don't have to compost. You can use it right away. Rabbit manure will not burn your plants the way that fresh cow manure or chicken manure can. So that is what we use the most here on the homestead, and I'm going to use that in this pot here. Rabbit manure is little dry pellets like this. They're just wonderful little magic pellets of fertilizer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump some on the top here, and I'm going to mix that into the first several inches of the soil. So if you have access to rabbit manure, go ahead and do that. But if you don't have access to rabbit manure, you can use steer manure that's already composted. You can buy that at a lot of the garden stores. You can use composted chicken manure. Just follow the instructions on how much to use and work it into the first few inches of your pot. Now, the second type of fertilizer that we use here on the homestead is fish emulsion. Now, fish emulsion is a liquid type of fertilizer. I have a gallon of it here. We've had it for a while, so the label's off. I don't even remember what kind of brand it is, but you can search fish emulsion online, and whatever fish emulsion you can find will be perfect. Now, fish emulsion is liquid, like I said, so I'm not going to put it on quite yet. I'm going to water it in when I'm done. But the ratio you use here is 2 tablespoons per gallon of water. That's what you would mix up. And then you would use it in, a watering can, and then just water it into your plant. So after I'm done here, that's what I'll do. I'll put 2 tablespoons of the fish emulsion concentrate in here, fill it up because this is a 1 gallon container, and I will water it in. This is more than I need for this tiny little plant, so I'll probably take this and water lots of my other plants with it because it really is good stuff. The third type of fertilizer that I want to talk with you about is kind of new to us. We just started using this year. It is an all-purpose organic fertilizer. Now, we picked this up at Walmart. It's pretty affordable. And the thing that I like about this is it's OMRI approved, which means it's approved for organic gardening. With this, it is a granule, okay? And with this fertilizer, you use 1 tablespoon per square foot. or about. This container I'm going to use this in, okay? It's just under 3 square feet of gardening space. So I'm going to play it safe, and I'm going to sprinkle 2 tablespoons of this all around the soil. That was 1. This is 2. I'm going to sprinkle this. And then I'm going to work it in to the first few inches of the soil like before. Now, all of these methods are really great to give your plants a nice, great head start. Now, with all of these organic fertilizers, you can refresh and reapply about every 30 to 60 days. Just watch your plants. If you don't think that they're thriving as much after about a month, add some extra fertilizer. But if they're doing great, wait for another month and do it every 60 days. Okay, it's time for us to get started planting. So how do you figure out how many plants to put in your container? And I think that's a really valid question, and one that probably comes with a lot of fears for people. You don't want to put too many plants in a container, but you really want to maximize the growing space that you have. And my general advice about that is to follow the square foot planting guidelines. Now, that's a method of planting where you really intensively plant your plants to maximize your production in a small space. There are charts out there. If you just search square foot gardening chart or planting chart, it'll show you how many plants to put per square foot. And then you just need to really guess how much planting space you have in your pot. Now, there are ways to figure out how much square foot of planting space you have in a circular pot. It's something like radius squared times pi, or there are calculators online that you can just put in the radius or diameter of your planting space and it'll figure it out for you. So go ahead and do that. But we come from a family of nerdy farm mathematicians, and they love that kind of stuff. So I know that in this container here, I have just under 3 square feet of planting space. Today, in this planter, I am planting calendula. It's a flower, but it's also a medicinal flower that is really great for your skin. So that's what I'm going to be planting in here. I'm going to be planting 6 plants that I started from seed. They're looking pretty good, but they're ready to get down into some bigger dirt than this. If you're new to planting small plants like this, it is really pretty easy. You dig a hole, you take the plant out of a little pot and put it into the hole that you dug, okay? So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm starting with 1 plant in the middle of this planter. I dug a hole, then take your pot, stabilize the plant with your fingers here, tip it upside down, shake it, pat it, squeeze it a little bit, and it will come out like that. Don't those look nice? Now I'm going to tickle the roots a little bit on this to encourage it to spread out in the big pot. Put it down in the hole that I dug and cover it up with soil. It really is that easy. Don't be afraid of this. Okay, let's go on to the others. So again, we're just going to dig a hole that is down as far as you think that your plant will go. If you want to test out the depth, stick your pot in there. That's about right. Support your plant. Tip it upside down. There you go. Look how nice that looks. Disturb those roots just a little bit. Put it down in the hole. Fill in that hole. Now we just need to do that until all of our plants are in the container. Okay, that's all finished. Now, don't get hung up on perfection. They don't have to be equally spaced. Don't even worry about that. They're in the ground, they're gonna grow beautifully, and they are gonna produce food or medicine or seasonings, whatever it is that you're planting these for, just plain beauty, that's fine. These are gonna do great. Let's move on to another planter. So in this container, I'm gonna plant some herbs. I'm gonna plant lavender and creeping thyme. Now I think that container gardening is just perfect for growing herbs. And the nice thing about these containers is you can be really creative and plant something pretty dramatic that will like cascade over the side. And I think that the combination of lavender, which will produce some beautiful bluish purple flowers, and this creeping thyme that will grow and cascade over the side, I think it'll be just really beautiful. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this pot here. Now I know that lavender and thyme plants grow well together. They're considered companion plants. But there are some plants that are considered antagonists, where if you plant them next to each other, they'll actually do worse than if you planted them away from each other or next to other plants. I don't have all of that memorized, and you don't need to memorize that either. There's a ton of information and lots of charts online about plants that grow well together and plants you shouldn't plant next to each other. So make sure that you check into that before you combine plants together in one pot. Now I also want to tell you that when I plant in containers, I tend to plant a little bit closer together because I want a dramatic effect. I don't want a pot that just has one tiny little plant in it and, you know, it doesn't even seem like it really does much. I want a nice full effect. So that's why I'm planting 2 lavender plants and 2 thyme plants today. There's nothing more special about planting these plants than the calendula. It's the same techniques, you guys. So just dig a hole and put your plant start in there. Okay, that one is finished, and in no time, this is just gonna fill out and be beautiful. Okay, we have one more container to plant, and this time I'm going to use seed, which can be very intimidating for some people. In this hanging pot, I'm going to plant nasturtiums because they will grow out the side of the pot and trail down beautifully, and they have gorgeous, gorgeous flowers. But planting seed is really intimidating for some people, and I really want to make you feel more comfortable about it. The instructions for how to plant seed is generally always on the back of the seed packet. It will tell you how deep to plant the seed in the soil and how far apart they need to be planted from each other. And that should really help you determine how many plants you should put in your pot. Now, one general rule that I follow myself when it comes to planting seed and what depth or how far down into the soil to plant them, I generally follow the rule that you plant it twice as deep as the seed is big. So if your seed is a ½ an inch tall, for instance, you would plant it an inch down. If they're teeny tiny seeds, you could probably just put them on the top of the soil and ruffle them in a little bit. So this nasturtium seed is, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch to 1/3 of an inch, maybe ½ an inch long, so I'll put that down maybe an inch or a little bit less. So like I said, I want a pot that's full of plants, so I'm gonna plant them a little bit closer together than they probably should. So in this case, I am going to plant 1 seed in the middle and 4 around the side, and I'm going to hope for the best. but I encourage you to try growing some plants from seed, because as soon as you get success that first time, you're going to feel so good about it and you're going to do it again and again. And let me tell you that planting from seed is so much more economical than buying little transplants from the store. So pick one plant and try to start it from seed this year. Hanging pots are not just for flowers. Herbs would be perfect in there, and there are some vegetables that you can grow in a hanging pot. Think of cucumbers, cherry tomatoes, lots of things. So now we're on to watering. Remember, I did not put any fertilizer in this hanging plant because I'm going to use a fish emulsion, which is 2 tablespoons per gallon. But I want to talk with you just quickly before we go about watering and how to tell whether or not your pots need to be watered or if they're okay the way they are. Now, there's danger in underwatering, but there's also danger in overwatering. So I want to share with you 2 tips that will help you decide whether or not you need to water or not. Now, after you plant, the first time you water needs to be a really good soak. In the case of this pot, you have all of this soil to water. But after that, you need to figure out whether or not your pot needs water. And there are 2 ways you can go about that. The first way is you can buy a little gauge that you stick down in the soil and it tells you whether or not you need to water. You can get these pretty inexpensively, even at Walmart, they sell them. The other trick that I've used for years and years is to just stick your finger down in there. If you can get to your first knuckle and it is still pretty wet down there, don't water. When you stick your finger down in there up to your second knuckle and it's pretty dry, you need to water. That's super cheap and it's really pretty easy. Now, when you are starting seeds, like in this hanging basket, like I said, you need to water thoroughly the first time. After that, you really need to make sure that even the top of this is moist all of the time, but don't overdo it. Every day, just sprinkle some water on there really lightly. It doesn't have to get all the way down here after the first watering. As long as you're watering on top, the seeds will stay moist enough for them to germinate without waterlogging all of this soil down here. This might sound a little bit trickier, but it's okay. Just make sure you keep the soil moist on top so those seeds can soften, open up, and germinate. So you guys, I hope this took away some of the mystery or some of the fears that you may have about planting in containers or doing container gardening. It really is pretty easy, and it gives you an opportunity. If you don't have a lot of space to grow in big gardens, you can still grow some food or raise some herbs or plant some gorgeous flowers that are just gonna beautify your living space. And if you know somebody who is maybe a little bit fearful to start planting in some pots or growing some things, make sure you share this video with them and encourage them to plant some food or grow something green. Hey, if you're enjoying our channel, make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. Share this video, you guys. We would absolutely love it. And until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care and God bless.